Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to talk to you again. I am recording this video here from Basalt, Colorado, an awesome little mountain town that we absolutely love. It's pretty close to Aspen, but just has more relaxed vibes, I find, even though I absolutely do think Aspen is gorgeous. Um, but Basalt is one of our favorite places out here in the Rockies, and I'm especially excited to be out here because I'm working on a new book that is going to be set here in the sort of Aspen corridor, but specifically in Basalt, Colorado, as a town next to Aspen. But more on that book later. The purpose of this video is really to talk about some books that I would recommend, specifically in the spy thriller genre, that I think are just so good and there's so much to learn from them. Every time I have reread any of them, I feel like there's more I can get out of them. But before that, let me show you the mountains behind me and the lake because it's just so stunning. It's a little bit chilly, but I felt like I couldn't not record out here when I was going to do this video. Anyway, so book number one, The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. One of my all-time classic favorites. You know, it came out so long ago now, but it's still so good. It just holds up so well. I've heard authors within the community kind of call it the perfect thriller, and I really couldn't agree more. It's amazing how Forsyth is able to take what many of us would consider small stakes. You know, if we're not French or European, this plot against Charles de Gaulle doesn't necessarily seem that dire. Whereas, you know, so many other thrillers are going for global stakes and the end of the world if the protagonist doesn't get to the bottom of the mystery or the issue. But Forsyth delivers on this assassin going after de Gaulle so incredibly well. And he does that even with this kind of journalistic style where he gives out so much detail about the different things that are happening in the background around the history of France and Algeria and de Gaulle. But it's so well done, and I have reread it so many times and will never stop. I mean, not continuously, of course, but I'm sure I'll reread it once every couple years for forever because there's just so much. It's so much fun, and there's so much to get out of it. The next book I would talk about is The New Girl by Daniel Silva. I'm sure many of us have heard of Daniel Silva, preeminent spy thriller writer, author of the Gabriel Allon series. But I particularly enjoyed this book and want to call it out because I think it does such a good job of looking at nuanced setting and character and how much family and other things drive what Gabriel Allon does and how he goes through his life. And it's really fun, but it's also very emotional and evocative, and I think Silva does an amazing job. This was actually the first Silva book that I read, and still remains one of my favorites. Certainly, even though he's written so many great books, definitely my top choice. Next is I Am Pilgrim by Terry Hayes. You know, I was talking earlier about smaller stakes in Forsyth's The Day of the Jackal. Now, in I Am Pilgrim, you get huge stakes. You do get huge stakes, but they are really, really well executed with all kinds of very intricate things and plot twists that are very, very interesting and really well done. And sometimes I think what we run into with super duper high stakes is that they can feel unrealistic, but in this case they land super well. I don't think they're unrealistic at all, which is part of why it's so scary. Plus, you know, the different human themes that Hayes explores with his characters, I think so interesting and so much to learn from, especially when you have really long thrillers like that, which typically aren't considered prime of the market. I think publishing is sort of pushing for shorter and shorter books. But when you have books like this that still execute so well, even at the longer length, it's a good reminder that it's really more about execution than it is about, the top few things you would put out about any book in terms of like word count or location or protagonist or whatever. Next, I would go to Slow Horses by Mick, which is just so fun. We have so many protagonists in this genre that are reasonably well put together, or maybe they have like one big fatal flaw, but it's not necessarily affecting them all the time. But in Slow Horses, you have this total cast of misfits and screw-ups with this core of competency. Sorry about that car going by behind me. And it's just so different and interesting and unique to the genre, and that's what makes it so special. His whole series is wonderful, and absolutely something that's a good reminder about like how to create a diverse set of characters. And I say diverse in this sense, obviously, race and ethnicity and background applies, but also just diversity of how they engage and interact with the world. And then finally, I have Kill Shot by Vince Flynn. Sorry, I had to look back. I just lost my train of thought for a second there. And now that I saw what I had written down, I can't even believe that I did, because to not have a Vince Flynn book on this list of amazing spy thrillers is such an oversight. Well, I do have him on my list, but to just not have him come top of mind. So Vince Flynn wrote the original Mid-Trap series, which has then been continued by Kyle Mills, who is a good friend of mine, and that's how I discovered the series. And then now the series is being continued by Don Bentley, who I've also had the privilege of meeting, and he's amazing. So I would say that all the books in the series are so much fun and so good to read. But Kill Shot still is my absolute favorite. Now, why is that? Kill Shot is the second in sort of the original prequel series around the Mid-Trap character and how he becomes who he is. So later in the series, Mid-Trap becomes kind of larger than life, like incredible, a little bit infallible, and I say that in the best way. Still fallible in some sense and vulnerable in things, but at the beginning, he's really learning how to be an assassin and how to be a spy and all that stuff. And Kill Shot is such a great depiction of all of that. There's this incredible scene right at the beginning when everything has gone wrong, and Mitch has to like survive floating down the Seine in Paris, and it's just so fun and so well done. And I really love that origin story of a great character who's been continued for so long since. But Kill Shot is my absolute favorite from the series, and plus, I can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with a book like that that's set in Paris with like all the most charming bits of the city, but also some of the seedier bits, and I think that's just so amazing to hear about and engage with. All right, so that's my top 5 in the spy thriller genre. I'm sure there are so many other books that I would love to add, and I'm sure I will talk about them in future videos. But thank you so much for listening and joining me out here in amazing Basalt. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.